truly feel life is too short, and I have a lot of fun in what I do. And I work with a lot of grad students, postdocs, early career faculty. I work at a place called the Beacon Center. We're located, the fiduciary is Michigan State, but we work with 5 other institutions. I do a lot of things around recruiting. I have 67 undergrads right now that are happy that I'm here in Austin and not overseeing them and doing our weekly Friday meeting. And I do a lot as relates to helping with that transition. I will also be at the booth from 5:45 to 7:45 tomorrow. And so after I share my profoundness, please come out and see me. So what do? I'm kind of on star and I'm a savvy expert, and you'll know that and you'll just catch on real soon. So I'll try not to stand because it's kind of hard to see over there. So there's a diversity of careers, and obviously that's as a work group. It was interesting to find out that we had been together for 2 years. And we're kind of talking about this from the administrative perspective, but it's really about, experience is something that you need and you tend to get it just slightly after you needed it. And so what we're doing right now is trying to be proactive. It's helping you become savvy experts to figure out how to navigate this journey. And as students, I think there's a lot of decision points. Traditionally, there's like a linear, you go from your undergrad to your graduate, postdoc, your associate professor position to your become a tenure professor. That would be the Yellow Book Road. That was also a movie. I think now that, life is not linear, and neither are careers. They're flexible. The way in which we're teaching is flexible. And so each of us, as we kind of went around, we're talking about you, but not about ourselves. We did kind of a round table and we said, what's been your career path? And what's been your mentored experience? And even at our table, our career paths had been very diverse, and our mentored experience had been very positive and negative. My background is extremely diverse. It's not that I can't keep a job, I'm just extremely well-rounded. And so I have worked in industry, government, nonprofit, and academics. Also in politics, so another side of me is I'm the president of city council where I'm from. So I will appreciate for any bullshit that comes out of my mouth. It's the politician coming out of me. So with the background challenge, competition, this competitive pool has no lifeguard. So we were looking at the data, and the data states that with our tenure track opportunities, approximately 15% of PhDs will eventually land, looking at the data, within a tenure track position. Now, I know each of you need a hug after me telling you that statistic. Well, let me just rock your world more. There's even more things that are changing the reality of how we're doing education. Remember, education is a business. There's a very strong component to education being a business model. So we're also looking at integrative departments. It used to be biology, and there used to be the math department, and it used to be computer science. Now you have integrative biology. And so as we're creating these models, the way in which who's teaching the class is also changing, and how many classes are available is also changing. Our universities hiring more specialists and adjunct than FTE, full-time employees. What's the impact of rising tuition? We know one of the biggest models right now that's being pushed is starting off with a community college and then transferring to a 4-year institution. Distance learning and online classes. What does that mean when you have the capacity to teach the masses versus standing face-to-face and teaching a class? Publisher pairs has been replaced sometime by, grants or gone. If you know anything about grants, we know that the funding model, percentage of those that are actually funded, is shrinking. This much more competitive. And overhead costs. Certain institutions that we've collaborated with, and particularly with the Ivy League, their overhead costs are 95%. So whatever dollar you need to do your research, you have to have a double-sized grant to support the work you're going to be doing. It's a different world. That's the good news. But the 85%, here's my theory. The hardness of the butter is proportional to the softness of the bread. All right. So for the 85% of you that are looking for this critical need to look at these diverse careers and those options, there's incredible alternatives. And I hate the word alternative because it sounds like something that is a detour, something negative and so on. These are actually options. You've been tracked that this is the option. What we're trying to do now is kind of open the blinders and let you know there are many pathways and many options. And so here's the thing, and my bullets will track your eye as to what you should be really looking at. Your faculty mentors are advising you. However, most people talk about what they know, and most people are grounded and expert in their path. And so they really become the soft bread. So what we're going to talk about today is, okay, how do I become savvy? If the person I'm closest to, who I have made my centralized mentor and guru of knowledge, how do I expand that network? All right. So examples of new STEM professions. So we're looking at, these wicked evolutionary problems, which require dynamic and more complex and robust solutions. And so our problems are now being solved with these teams called multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. So even the way we're talking is changing. And this has really changed even within the last 3 years. And so as we're doing that, some of the ways in which we're looking, and curriculums haven't caught up. So when we talk about these kind of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and transdisciplinary teams, they require different skills. Who's negotiating the language? So if I say the word network, well, everyone understands a network within your frame. But if I'm saying network to computer scientists versus those that do systems, those that do social scientists, it has a whole different meaning. So just operationalizing in a way in which everybody has the same understanding. You're looking at administrators and project managers, evaluators that do network analysis, knowledge management and transfer strategists, data miners and software carpentry specialists. These are all new terms. These are all new skill sets that haven't necessarily been in the way in which we answer questions. Additionally, some of the new STEM professions are looking at kind of that interface between all these different individuals at the table. And so some of the new, and some of you can't really see my slides. These slides will be available, so you don't have to keep running your battery down, taking pictures or taking notes. But interdisciplinary executive scientists, integrative and implementation scientists, specialists, research development professional. Those are terms you've never heard of. But these are new skills, new jobs are being created out of bringing these teams together and the way we're answering these wicked problems. Because all the easy answers are gone. All the simple tools are just simple. And now we've got to bring them together. And so it's requiring a different set of skills and a different way in which we're packaging our profession. So expanding and sustaining STEM. Collaboration and robust solutions are being rewarded. If you look at NIH, NSF, anything that starts with an N, any federal dollar, government, even corporate dollars, you will find that they're starting to ask for these teams and a way in which we solve it. But you have to understand, the way we're solving our problems is directly related to funding. So as much and as bright as this room is, you have to be able to communicate what you're doing and how you're doing it to those decision makers who didn't pass science. So it's incredibly important that some of you are doing the inclusive ecosystem of science. It's imperative that some of you diversify and you're sitting at the decision makers table, and that includes politics. And so to succeed in politics, it's often necessary to rise above your logic. And if you're following politics at all, that makes sense to you. If you're not, probably isn't funny. But it's imperative that we have people that are looking at politics, scientific communication, being able to take your scientific, very specific and complicated concepts and to translate that to common language, common core values. That's what knowledge transfer is. That's why you keep seeing within your research, you have to have a section on broader impacts and knowledge transfer. So for some of you, you may say, why? I'm answering this question, it's so profound. Is it profound for your grandparents? Is it profound for the man that lives across the street? It has to make sense. It has to tie in to our values and everyday quality of life issues. You have to be able to crosswalk that. Because if you look at the National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, their operational budget comes from Washington. It doesn't come from scientists. It comes from people that are also balancing homeland security, unemployment, all these other things that are competing. So we need people that need to be compelling. Advocacy in conservation, as well as outreach and education. So we need to be at all decision-making tables. And so when we talk about, how flexible are my skills, your skills, let me tell you, I can crosswalk your job to anything. To anything. That's why I'm OnStar, recalculating. I'm like, recalculating. And the savviness. It's all about being savvy. It's all about packaging yourself in a way in which you're value added. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. So how do I do that? Thought you might ask. So how do I use the research process as a strategy? So you never really learn to swear until you started this process. You're like, how does this work? How do I unpack this? Again, you have the tools. You lay them out like a research question, using all the steps that you would use to answer your scientific question. Using the SMART goals because they have to be measurable and they have to be within a time frame and all the things that you just learned with the IDP. But now this is the action side. All right. So let's come up with a scenario. I'm going to walk you through the scenario as to how you do this. So I want you to be comfortable, uncomfortable. Does that make sense? Here's the thing about comfortable. When you're comfortable, you're not trying. When you're comfortable, it's rote. When you're riding that bike in 5th gear, it doesn't take much because you know what, you already got it up. You're like, all of a sudden, you know what? You want to be a little bit uncomfortable because that uncomfortable, that angst is a little bit of growth. It's also causing you to reach back on your skills, your strategies, your toolkit to expand and do things that help enhance the way in which whatever it is you're doing. So let's come up with a scenario. Why is this scenario spot on? Because I've had it many times in many conversations. So here's one that happened recently, so I'm going to use this one. And so I think I had a student, he was a postdoc, and he was thinking, I think I might be interested in working in a small biotech company. I don't know what the next step would be to explore that. So what are some of the things you think that would surround that? And you got the tutoring up there, just in case you couldn't think it. Those that can't see it, I'll kind of read through it. Is my faculty mentor, this is so not going to go over well. My faculty mentor chose me, invested in my dollars for me to have this fellowship or for my graduate program or my postdoc award. They're paying for me to go to conferences. They're mentoring me through a couple papers. They've invested a lot in me. I feel like I'm betraying them if I have determined I want to go a different direction. So obviously, talking to my faculty mentor, not the best. But here's what people don't understand. Is what you should have is the correct ratio of mentors you should be 5 to 7. I think most people make a mistake. They have 1 or 2 people. And they go to those 1 or 2 people for I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to the Wizard of Oz because they can answer all my questions. No, you should have 5 to 7 people that are in your circle, your network, your kitchen cabinet of answering your questions. Those that are expert within the scientific content. Maybe it has to do with kind of navigation. Maybe it has to do with savviness around whatever. You need to create this network. No one person has all the answers. And so once you do that, you can move on to your introduction, your abstract. So here's kind of the introduction. Here's the scenario, the abstract. I recently collaborated with this company. My mentor is not going to be useful to me. How do I look and investigate this opportunity further? Sound familiar? Cool. My lit review and background review. Where do I get the information? Where do I go next? You read about the company. Some people, they don't read about the company. I mean, look at their strategic goals. Pull up their annual plan. What do they see as core values? What are some of the questions that they're answering? Who's rewarding them as it relates to who they're collaborating with? Depending on what are their outreach efforts? Maybe it's important that they don't just do the science, but they're actually reaching out into the community, maybe doing K-12 things, or maybe they've got some environmental things in which they're using their outreach and their community investment. Also look at their regulatory reports. Maybe there's Department of Environmental Quality. Depending on what it is. Maybe there's some things that have been some reports because they're within patents or whatever it is. Do a little background on them, the same way you would look up your lit review for the type of research you're doing. Use LinkedIn. You can put in a company and hit and find out, are you one person removed, 2, 3, 4? Are there other individuals that have worked specifically at that company or a biotech company that you can tap into? You don't know who you don't know. And most of the time, you're 1 or 2 degrees from your expert. Many times it's someone you just haven't been in contact with, and they have the ability to answer your question because they're living what you're looking at going into. And then ask the questions around, or set up the meeting with the person that is recruiting you and say, what makes me attractive? Is it because of my skills? Is it because of, me personally? You like the way that I worked, did that collaborative research? What are some of the expectations of this job? There's a very different climate in a company than there is in research. There's flexibility. Sometimes people can come and, sometimes it's like, what? When we have a meeting, it's face-to-face. We never do things virtual. There's no Skyping. There's no FaceTime. I want people in front of me. Or maybe it's more that it's more remote, and then no one really comes in because our company has so many collaborators from different areas that we tend to collaborate, over some kind of a communication software or something like that. How do you advance in this company? And it's not that I don't like my job, but I need to also know, what's my trajectory if I stay in this company? What does that look like? And that's a question you should be asking. And then ultimately, how receptive is the company to innovative new creative ideas? Because as researchers, we have rewarded your innovation and creativity. Some companies don't. Some companies are driven by profit. They're driven by what the market is requiring. And so you may have an incredible, interesting thing you'd like to pursue. Is that something that your company would embrace, or do you typically kind of toe the line and you're driven by what the company values and the company goals are? That's important to know, because it can be very frustrating if you're in something that doesn't reward your curiosity. Your methodology, mixed methods, primary data and secondary data. Talk to people, as I previously stated, talk to people who are working in the biotech industry. Look around your university. Go on to the faculty listings and actually look and see who's doing these collaborative types of research where they're doing knowledge transfer. They're working side by side with the company, and how are they, within the academic world, answering these wicked problems that companies are real-time asking. Because sometimes you're researching some of these research questions, but then sometimes you're actually answering real-time questions because a company or a department or someone has come to you because they don't have the tools and resources. And so what does that look like? Because maybe you stay in academics, but you do a lot of these knowledge transfer problems, and so you kind of have your foot into a corporate setting as well as doing. And some people actually straddle, is that they're in the corporation and they're kind of an adjunct professor. I mean, there's ways. These aren't clear lines. There's ways in which you can do and figure out ways that work best for you. As far as talking to your career services department, most people don't. Because you think, well, what do they know? I'm doing science. They don't know. You don't know what you don't know. That your careers department on your institution may have very tight connections with that company or a similar company in which they can connect you and talk to you. Also look at talking to your alumni services, your alumni departments, and find out who from your institution is already working in that company or another company. Because alumni like to talk to alumni. So maybe somebody that's an alumnus from your institution would be willing to have like an hour conversation with you and answer your questions. Now it's non-threatening. You've connected as an alumni, and they're answering all the questions that you want to know about, as well as being very candid of, here's some things that probably someone recruiting you wouldn't share. Your secondary data would be looking at, some of what I talked about with your, some of the reports and so on. Then taking it to crosswalking the jargon. Words matter. So look at the difference between managers, more of that business corporate set, skills that are rewarded. Leaders is more of what you see rewarded within the academy. So the difference would be a manager and a leader. Managers focus on things, leaders focus on people. Managers do things right, and leaders do the right things. Plan versus inspire, organize, influence, direct, motivate, control, collaborate, follow the rules, generate the rules. Now, what I'm saying is the same thing. I'm using different words. So if I'm writing things on a resume, or if I'm writing things and talking about things, and I'm applying to an academic institution, I'm going to use the words that are in the right column. If I'm talking more corporate, I'm going to use more of the words in the left column. When you interview, haven't been in a lot of things. When I interview, if I'm interviewing for corporate, I'm going to say I a lot. Corporate wants to know your skills. Corporate wants to know your role. If I'm interviewing and in the academy, corporate wants to know that the academy wants to make sure that you're a good team player, you work together within the confines of the group. And so it's a lot of we. Here's what my group did. Now my role was this, but you're not going to say I. You're going to say my team did this and my role was this. It's language, but it's also the difference of what is rewarded in either of those two different environments. A Vita versus a resume. Now I don't know how to say that because I'm like, what's the difference between a Vita and a resume? All right, a Vita is like a research article. The resume is your abstract. The Vita is like a full-length movie. Your resume is a movie trailer. A buffet versus appetizers. A keg of beer versus a can of beer. Vita, what your mother would say about you. Resume, what the world actually wants to know about you. So it's a way in which that seems to be the hardest things when I'm working with students that are transitioning. It's like, I don't know how to write my resume. I got so much to say. Really, really don't want to know all that. If I want to know all that, then I'll watch the movie. I just want the trailer. So think about really, 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 really good movies, right? But you had a trailer that was really good too. So the resume is about being compelling, telling your story, getting people to lean in so that you have the ability to balance it with that Vita. That's the difference. Does that make sense? Okay. Your results. So what legitimate information did you gather and how will it guide your decision? Weighing both the opportunities but against your personal goals. I think it's really important to know what is right and what's wrong. There's no right or wrong. It's optimal. I told you about my different jobs. My different jobs means I have a lot of interests. I love science. I absolutely love science. That's why I work at the Beacon Center. I also love politics. That's why I'm on city council. I also love sport. That's why I'm on a lot of boards. I also like to work with families and youth, and I'm also on other boards. And what happens is, as my life goes, my pie keeps changing. It just keeps evolving. So your ability and your flexibility of going through your careers, it's just you're evolving. You're evolving. Your interests, life happens. Sometimes you cut your pie differently. That's okay. So your ability to evolve with it and your loves and things that are, sometimes it's more prevalent in what you're doing and sometimes it's a little bit less. And my thing is, when you select a job, if you have multiple interests and you're like, oh my goodness, I have so many interests, I always say, okay, what what do you want your job to be? And then you supplant it with other activities. And so your job may be the core of science, but you may love communication. So you work on a blog, or you work for a publication or something like that. Or you really love advocacy, so you do the research, but you're also in this advocacy group. Or you work at a nonprofit advocacy, but you're still kind of doing some research on the side. You don't have to choose. You kind of figure out a balance in a way in which you're still meeting all your interests. So your job does not fulfill you. Your job does not fulfill you. Message. You figure out what it looks like and how to wrap it around. And that's how you always have quality of life. So for me, my ultimate goal in this world is when I die, that they can't wipe the smile off my face because I have no regrets. No regrets. No regrets. I talked about OnStar. How many of you did not use any kind of navigation and you were driving and you accidentally turned the wrong way? And you turned the wrong way and you noticed, I didn't know that store was there, or I didn't realize there was a park there. You learn new things. Because if you always go the same way, you always do the same thing the same way and get the same results. I mean, you actually want to. I mean, there's sometimes I know how to get there, but I will actually go a different way. I'll actually go the different way. I know how to get there, but I actually will go a different way because you know what? I know that's going to enhance my skills, it's going to give me more information, and I'm not comfortable. I'm comfortable, uncomfortable. Always think, again, the very last bullet, ultimately, plan B if I'm unhappy. There's one thing a friend of mine said, who's the CEO of a very major Fortune 50 company. Always have two things ready in your professional career. Always have an unsigned letter of resignation, and always have an updated resume. Now you're thinking, what? You know what that means when you have it? You don't have to use it. I'm not saying always have unsigned divorce papers. No, I'm saying always have, if you have a letter of resignation and you have an updated resume, you have options. Just have peace of mind. I have options. Because you know what? There is nothing wrong with conceding this environment may not be for me. Because most people say, did you quit your job? It's like, no, the environment wasn't for me. I reassessed and the environment wasn't for me. That's okay. Because you know what? When the environment is for you, you are so value added. You are so critically important to how that company advances. It's important that it does work for you. Because ultimately, the company or the organization or the department will not move forward if you're not at full capacity. So in actuality, you're doing them a favor. Yeah, just doing you a favor. Here's my resignation. With the discussion, talk it over. Talk it over with career or staff that have had the background and the direction you'd like to go in. Don't underestimate the career services advisors. They're not just there for professional schools and things like that. They will help you navigate that, as well as your grad school. Your grad school also has career advisors that can help you kind of talk through. And sometimes it's important to say, don't ask, what kind of job can I get? And saying, what kind of skills do I have? Because once people start to tease out your skills, when you start looking at jobs, when you do search of job skills, jobs pop up. Go into LinkedIn, put in one of your skills in there, and then see what jobs pop up. Sometimes you don't have to put the job in there, because when you put the job, you're putting in parameters. So, there's data-driven, there's questions that we ask. So we have a question, and we cultivate the data to answer the question. And sometimes we let the data drive our questions. This is a data-driven question. So put in your skill and then find out what jobs are popping up. It'd be really interesting. And it'll be things that you probably never described yourself as, or you never thought would be a core component to those skills. Look at your friends and family. Don't underestimate your friends and family, but please do not ask that friend that has a lot of advice but no ambition. They have all the, like, you know what you should do? It's like, if you know so much, why aren't you doing it? But, ask your friends, because you don't know who I know. You don't know who your family knows. So if you come up with a particular company or a job you think is interesting, keep throwing it out to the universe. Talk to your friends, talk to your family and so on. Do you know anybody that works in so-and-so? And it's like, oh, somebody from my church does that. And you're like, really? You know somebody? Yeah, of course, that's so-and-so. You never know. You are 1 or 2 degrees from your answer. The conclusion. What did you decide to do? Are there intended and unintended consequences? If by chance you were to go and if you make a decision that takes you outside of the academy, there is consequences with that. How do you mitigate that? And a way in which, you never know. Our decisions, you go back and forth. That's why you never burn a bridge. How do I go back and forth between where I am and where I'd like to go in a way in which my exit plan, actually enhanced our relationship? So there's ways in which you will kind of script yourself on transitioning if you go outside the academy, or let's say you're working in outside the academy and you want to go back. There's please don't think if you get your PhD or your postdoc, you can't go back to academics. Now, it used to be difficult. It's not as difficult as it used to be, especially as I talked about the new model of how we're doing higher education. How will you do it? Again, that is having kind of a storyboard scripted, as to get on that whiteboard, that storyboard scripting of, how am I going to do this? What's the best way to do this? Ask people to help you with language and the ways in which you can transition. And then when will you do it? Creating that timeline. What's this going to look like? Sometime your strategy may be a year from now. It's not like, I'm going to give you my 2-week notice. It may be something I'm going to do in the next 1 year, 2 year. It doesn't matter. There's no amount of time that you shouldn't be thinking about, well, it's a little too early for that. It's never too early for that. That's how you start to take information and put it in the parking lot. All right. And then I'm coming up on a bibliography. It's like looking at resources. Just keep those resources. Here's some, I didn't get a chance to drop quite a few in there, and I was trying not to be redundant from some of the things that you have, but there's a lot of resources up there if you just search. Keep those in your, just keep those in your parking lot, so when you're looking at it, you're able to put your hands on some really good resources, or ask, where's some good resources I can tap into that would help me in my decision? And then ultimately, here's my profound thought. A great conclusion is a place where you got tired of thinking. So I had to be really careful with that mic, because I had it a little bit lower before and my squirrel looked really excited to see you, so I had to move it up a little bit. But thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, I have literally 6 minutes to answer them. And thank you. Any questions? Or you just want that break? Am I between you and your break? Is the fruit, can you smell it? You smell fruit? No? So anyway, all right, thank you so much. I will be at the booth with Liz, and if you have any questions, please feel free to come to me. And again, take advantage of these individuals that are sitting here, because these are paid tutors. So let them answer your questions and let them help you navigate, and answer some of the challenges you may be going through.